stuff. Evan Smith, keep talking to your sources and do what you can to help us understand this. I think we'll be coming back to you. I can tell you, for all the lawyers who are listening to me right now, who are going to understand what I'm about to tell you, this is from the Supreme Court of Texas. Orders pronounced. A stay is issued in the following petition for writ of mandamus in re State of Texas from Dallas County. The district court's order granting emergency petition to extend voting hours issued today in cause number styled Cardell Coleman in his capacity as Dallas County Democratic Party chair versus Paul Adams in his official capacity as Dallas County Elections Administrator in the 162nd District Court, Dallas County, Texas, is stayed, meaning the earlier ruling that was in place that extended Dallas County voting, that order is stayed. And then here's the money quote. Voting should occur only as permitted by Texas Election Code Section 41-032. Votes cast by voters who were not in line to vote at 7 p.m. local time should be separated. Note, the petition for writ of mandamus remains pending before this court. Chris Hayes, what do you make of this?
Well, I mean, at one level, it's pretty insane to have a candidate who's on the ballot being the litigant who gets to decide. I mean, he's the state's attorney general, but getting to weigh in. I don't know if there's a particular valence to those votes at that hour for him. I think it's mostly about the Democratic primary. It also feels a little bit to me like if the calculation of the Republican establishment is that Crockett's an easier candidate to beat, that this goes against that, but like he's just doing it for love of the game. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like he's just super committed to making it hard for people to vote as just a deeply held view. And you know what I mean? Like
and making it hard to vote in Dallas.
Yes,
so
right.
in a big purple/red state, you take the cities that are very blue and you say those places have terrible voting. Look what a mess.
And so there's not like 3D chess here. It just seems like I don't like the fact that they extended voting hours because there's confusion. I want them to take that back.
But, Chris, the three-dimensional chess is tonight isn't that important. It's November. So as soon as they're starting to cause chaos and mistrust now, things are messy. When they're disastrous in November, it's like, well, we saw this coming.
Yeah, no, and that's an important thing to keep in mind, right? I mean, also this idea that you're going to segregate out these ballots based on who's online at 7 o'clock.
You can't.
And I generally just wanted to take a step back because we can get in the weeds here. There is no reason to think that there's any illegitimate or fake votes in the entire pool.
Yes.
There's no reason to think any of that.
No voter did anything wrong.
No one did anything wrong. There was confusion. So, like, you should always default to what will allow the most amount of actual legitimate voters to cast votes in an election. Again, whoever it is, whether that would benefit a Republican candidate or a Democratic candidate or the candidate you want or the candidate you don't, like just as a general principle. Yeah. And one of the things that's crazy about the world we live in, it is increasingly going to be the case that there are going to be places in which lower voter turnout would probably help Democrats than Republicans. And it's still the case that as a matter of principle, you should intervene on behalf of the maximal amount of voters being able to vote.
But doesn't this even hurt voter turnout in the fact that if these people are standing in line waiting to vote, at some point, a lot of them just say, forget about it. Yeah. I got to go home. I got to feed my kids dinner. I got to feed the cat. At some point, people are like, it's not worth it.
They do. But I would bet that's a smaller percentage of the people standing in line, number one. Number two, again, Republicans using the boniest part of their head right now in looking at this are not understanding what they're doing. They're setting up Texas to flip in November because they are systematically pissing off the voters there at the end of the day. There are, as we've already indicated tonight, there are voters who are moving out of the Republican column to vote in the Democratic primary because they do not like what the Republicans are doing. There are more Republicans who are voting tonight in the Republican column who are looking at this, just saying, well, why are you doing? First off, what does this have to do with the Republican primary? How does this impact Ken Paxton, right? There is no impact on Ken Paxton. To your point, Chris, this is a maximalist impact that they can bring to bear on what they want to label as corruption. To your point, it sets up the argument and the narrative that they want to put in place this November across the country.
Yes.
When that confusion sets in, when voters are bemused and don't know and they show up at the wrong polling place, see, we told you there was corruption. shut it down.
Well, and the narrative,
Time to
let's be specific about it, right? The narrative from Trump and the Republicans, from Trump in particular, from the Trump movement, is you can't trust votes that come from Democratic strongholds.
Yes.
So you can't trust votes from cities. You can't trust votes from places that have lots of people of color. So they're trying to make, I mean, it makes sense to fit the political narrative to try to make the Dallas votes, and I'm sure they hope the Houston votes or any other votes that fit that narrative seem as unknowable as possible, so as to create a pretext for being able to exclude them from the totals from that state. And
if we go upstream causally, the whole reason we're here, right, is because the Dallas County GOP refused to co-sign a memorandum of understanding to allow countywide voting. They had a demand for paper ballots, which again, like, has nothing to do with anything. There's no reason to think that they're better, right? That's a Donald Trump obsession. That's an election denier obsession. Like the whole causal chain that created the confusion that led to the necessity of opening the election earlier was the local Republican county party doing this.
And to that point, because it's really important to make that logistical point about what went wrong here. So now we've got this order from the Supreme Court of Texas that says, what's the remedy here? Well, we've paused the extension of the voting hours, and votes cast by voters who were not in line to vote at 7 p.m. local time should be separated. But is that feasible to do at one big county voting location in Dallas County? Probably not. Is it feasible to do at every individual precinct voting location in Dallas County? Because there is no central Dallas County voting location? Absolutely not. You're talking about all of those locations, all needing to do this arcane, if not impossible thing.
What's important about what you just said is that I can assure you that election officials were not standing outside once they got the clearance to keep the polls open, right? They knew where, like, Jacob was there at that appointed hour. He was with the last person who was identified in the line at the appointed hour. They didn't do that at the original polling time because they got the clearance to extend it.
You don't know who's online.
So you don't know who's online.
Yeah, they didn't mark them with a chalk line.
Thank you. That's why this order is so boneheaded.
But their goal isn't that which is knowable. Their goal is an endless morass of litigation. So the goal isn't to actually know who the person was that was.
Simone Sanders Townsend, you have been all over this in terms of anticipating some of these problems in these specific counties. What do you understand about the way this has played out over the course of the night and the reaction to what's happened with the Texas courts?
So I talked to a number of people on the ground from the Texas Democratic Party because, again, the parties are the administrators of the elections in a primary. This does not apply for the general. So in the general, the state is in charge of the election. So if people think, oh, are we going to have this particular issue come November? No, could be a different issue, but not this one. Lawrence and I were chatting in the green room, and he said, does this also affect the Republicans? And I thought it was a very good question. I asked the chair of the Texas Democratic Party, and the chair said it is their understanding that the judge's order is specific to the Democratic primary because, again, they didn't do a joint primary. So it is only the Democratic votes in Dallas County. The particular law that is being cited, Texas Democrats at large, they, if we look at the lawsuit that was filed by the Dallas County Democrats, not the Texas Democratic Party. I say that because there are factions within the Texas Democratic Party that say, Texas law is very, very strict. And it's very strict about when people can vote. Texas law, a law from 1985, says that the voting in Texas is from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. There's only been one time in our recent history since that law it's 40 years. The law is older than me. It's only been one time in our history, in May of 2024, that an extension has been given. And that was very specific. In Dallas County, a judge said there was a disaster because power was out in polling places in May of 2024. And because the power was out in about 100 polling places, they needed to extend the voting in those polling places. And that voting was extended for that very particular reason. But tonight, what we are seeing, to the conversation you all were having earlier, is the first time that this 1985 law has been challenged directly in this way. And yes, it is the Ken Paxton, who is a candidate on the ballot. Again, this doesn't affect them. It's just about the Democrats. They are weaponizing a law that has been on the books for 40 years to throw chaos into what is happening in the Democratic Party. The last point I'll make is this. There are a lot of votes out there. No one's going to count their chickens before they hatch, or their eggs, if you will. We have not heard from I've reached out to people within the Tallarico campaign. They are not saying whether or not yet they are of the belief that Jasmine Crockett is, that we will not know tonight. They are reserving their comment. So if they have some comment, I'll come back. I know Eugene is also talking to them. But I think that we are in a place now where come tomorrow, there'll be some people that'll say, Jasmine Crockett lost this race because of what Republicans did. And then there'll be some people that say, I think she just lost this race because she didn't run a good campaign. Either way, the narrative on this is now up in the air because of what the Republican in Texas decided to do to play in the race.
I was going to say that to me is the most important part of this. I don't want to get lost in the weeds here, people. I really don't. This is an orchestrated, coordinated effort, period. It has been from the very beginning.
I just want to know, but it is the law. That is the point I want to make here. It is the law.
It is the law. But we've already seen now in Texas and across this country how the law can be weaponized and used to full effect.
Looking at the Texas results, this may be one of the worst-case scenarios for Donald Trump. What we know for sure is that the Republican primary is headed to a runoff. That's a problem for a couple of reasons. The biggest concern for Trump is party division, and the runoff keeps that division alive. Here is how it works. Both parties hold primaries, and if no candidate gets 50% plus one vote, the top two move to a runoff later in the year. That becomes the final decision. But a runoff means the fight continues, campaigns spend more money, and there is less time to unify and organize for the general election. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, it looks like their primary could wrap up quickly, possibly with James Tallarico securing the nomination, which would allow Democrats to focus early on November. For Trump, there are risks either way. If his preferred MAGA candidate loses the runoff, that's a direct setback and a sign that Trumpism doesn't fully control the party. If his candidate wins, Trump can claim a short-term victory, but some analysts argue that a more hardline nominee could make the seat more competitive in the general election. At the same time, Democrats appear energized and more unified, partly driven by frustration over how Republicans have handled election process in the state. Since Texas Republicans control the state government, critics say any electoral confusion reflects on them. For voters unhappy with that, the current situation becomes a reminder of what happens when one party dominates.